I'll call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call when you're ready?
Mr. Ackerson?
Here.
Ms. Billman? Here. Mr. Fell?
Here.
Mr. Fitch?
Here.
Mr. Hopkins? Ms. Wadrago?
Here.
Mr. Storr?
Here.
Mr. Trail?
Here.
Mr. Turner?
We do have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are not.
The minutes from the September 7th, 2017 Regular Plan Commission. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Ackerson, second by Mr. Fell. Any changes to the minutes? No. We'll do a voice vote on this. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? The minutes are approved. We don't have any communications to my knowledge. We don't have any continued public hearings or old business. We have two new public hearings. First one that I'll open is Plan Case Number 2312 M17, a request by the Cunningham Children's Home of Urbana to rezone one parcel of 3.86 acres located at 1303 Cunningham Avenue from R4 medium density multifamily to B3 general business zoning district. Mr. Garcia.
Yes, good evening. Okay, so this is an application by the Cunningham Children's Home to rezone a parcel that is located on the southwest corner of Cunningham Avenue and Country Club Road, also known as Perkins Road to the east. And it's from R4, which is multiple family residential, to B3 general business. The parcel is currently vacant. There is a small wooded parking area there, which used to be used to welcome visitors to Urbana, but has not been used since 2005 for that purpose. This property is identified for business use in the comprehensive plan, which also identified the area to the west for expansion of the Cunningham Children's Home, and the Children's Home is now ready to expand into that area, and they're ready to rezone this parcel and then sell it for business use. For a little more background, between 1976 and 2005, the city held a long-term lease on the property for use as that welcome area, but by 2005 there was really no longer a need for that welcome area, so the use was discontinued. The city still held the long-term lease there. We had our welcome sign in that location, but on September 5th of this year, the City Council voted to enter into an agreement with the Cunningham Children's Home to terminate that long-term lease. And then as part of that agreement, the Children's Home agreed to plant one tree on its property for every tree that is removed once that area is developed. As you can see in Exhibits A and B, the area has a mixture, or the surrounding area is a mix of uses. There's business uses to the north and the east. There's also some higher density apartments to the north, and then the institutional use being the Cunningham Children's Home to the south and the west. And then also further west, there's some single-family homes out by the golf course. With respect to the comprehensive plan, if you look at Exhibit C, you'll see the future land use designations. And as you can see, the parcel that we're looking at is identified as community business in the comprehensive plan. And the rezoning and then the sale of this property for business use, and then also the expansion of the Cunningham Children's Home to the area over here that I'm putting the hand over. Both of those would help achieve the vision of the comprehensive plan for this area. In addition, the rezoning would help meet several of the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, including the goals to promote infill development, to enhance Urbana's commercial areas, and to create additional commercial areas to strengthen the city's tax base and service base. We feel that the site is also well-suited for business uses because it is along Cunningham Avenue, which is one of the city's most important commercial corridors. Now, in all rezoning cases, we run through the LaSalle criteria, so I'll briefly run through those, as well as give a little bit of analysis. So number one is deals with the existing land uses and zoning of the nearby property. As I went through a minute ago, there are business and high-density residential uses nearby, and the proposed rezoning would be highly compatible with these uses. And then the property to the south and to the west, owned by Cunningham Children's Home, they are the owners of this property, and they're actively seeking to sell it for business uses. So we feel that it would be an appropriate rezoning. Number two of the criteria are the extent to which the property values are diminished by the restrictions of the ordinance. And the R4 zoning district really limits the uses to residential uses on this site, and those might not be desirable along this business corridor right along Cunningham Avenue. So rezoning to B3 would allow for more business uses, and it would be more valuable land for development. Numbers 3 and 4 deal with whether the restrictions promote the public welfare in a significant way as to offset any hardship imposed on the property owner by the restrictions being the current zoning versus the future zoning. So we feel that the proposed rezoning would not be detrimental to the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare, and that the business uses could be a benefit because they'd be serving the community at large as well as the surrounding residential areas. And we also feel that the existing zoning is a barrier to developing the property for business uses as identified in the comprehensive plan, and we feel that rezoning to B3 would eliminate this hardship on the owners. Number 5 is the suitability of the subject property for the zoned purposes. As I've mentioned a couple times, this is a commercial corridor, so we feel that the rezoning to general business would be appropriate. And again, it's called for in the comprehensive plan. Number 6 is the length of time the property has been vacant as zoned. The only real use this property is seen is as that welcome center, so it was a pretty light use for a few decades, and for the past 12 years it has been vacant. So the options that the Plan Commission has in this case are to forward it to the City Council with a recommendation for approval, or to forward it to the City Council with a recommendation for denial of the rezoning request. And if you do so, you should provide reasons for the denial. Staff recommends that the Plan Commission forward the case with a recommendation for approval. And that concludes my report. Dan Holmer is here from the Cunningham Children's Home representing them, and he can answer any questions you might have that I can't answer, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Any questions for Mr. Garcia? Mr. Fell?
I assume this is already a platted individual lot?
That's funny that you ask. I have the final plat in my office. I just received it today, so they are in the process of replatting. The rezoning request does use the legal description from the soon-to-be platted lot.
Okay. Follow-up question. I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but vehicular access to that piece of property has to be how far from either, well, I guess from the corner of Perkins and Cunningham? Where can we access this site?
Yeah, that is a good question, and I do not know that off the top of my head. But they would certainly have to comply with our rules and with IDOT's rules, since Cunningham is a state highway.
is there a distance off of, I mean, judging by the other properties there, I don't know if the other ones are in conformance with how far they're supposed to be from the corner, but they're pretty far. So I'm guessing on the Cunningham Avenue, it's maybe about in the middle of this piece of property, but where is it on Country Club Road, if they want to access it on Country Club Road? So
I'm not-
what I'm driving at,
yeah.
it's a big parcel for one business use. So it's either going to be split up into several, I mean, further subdivided, or it's going to be a strip mall. So we have access issues to deal with there. I want to make sure we're okay.
Well, any development on the site would, of course, have to meet the access guidelines. So, and I don't know off the top of my head, maybe Mr. Holmer can speak to the intentions for the site, but I would assume that they have maybe some plans in the works.
Okay, good enough, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Fell. Further questions for Mr. Garcia? Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I think that's
Thanks.
it. All right, I'll outline quickly the rules for a public hearing. We will first allow the petitioner to address the commission, and we may ask questions. Then any person who is in favor of the petition will have a chance to address the commission. Following that, any person opposed to the petition will have a chance to address the commission. The petitioner will then have a chance to rebut, and then after that, we probably would close the public hearing, the public input section of the public hearing, and discuss the case and possibly vote. So those are our procedures. So if the petitioner would like to address this, please feel free. And if you could just state your name, even though we've heard it,
Sure.
know who you are.
Sure.
But if you could state it for the TV cameras, that'd be great.
Sure. I'm Dan Homer. I'm Vice President of Finance and Operations at Cunningham Children's Home.
All right, thank you.
I don't have a prepared statement. I think Kevin alluded to the fact that we do have a potential buyer for that property. I can tell you it's not a strip mall. The potential buyer, I can't disclose the name of that potential buyer at this point in time until they've completed the due diligence. I do know that they're anticipating the rezoning to B3. With respect to the access, our architect would have to kind of speak to that, because I think that's been a lengthy discussion with the city about how that would actually be developed for access off of Cunningham. There is, with the parcel off of, there is an access, a current access off of Country Club Road that's already a curb cut, if you will, that used to be the main entrance for the UCC, the Urbana Community Correctional Center. Prior to that, the TB Sanitarium. So I can't speak to whether or not the fact this potential buyer would be using just that as the access, but that is already there as a curb cut. And I know there was some discussion, and Lori might be recollection, in terms of the way that a portion of that parcel lines up across from, and I believe it's Thompson Street. So they thought, if a possible curb cut, and that's a fair distance, a good block or so from the corner of Country Club Road, would potentially be the area for a curb cut off of Cunningham. So the reason for the sale, and Kevin alluded to it, and it's in the presentation there. We are in the process of building the Education Recreation Center, so it's a $13 million building. This will help fund that. When we purchased the property back in 1996 from the county, we did so with knowing that there would be no intention ever to build one of our buildings, one of our program buildings, that close to Cunningham Avenue. So that's always been considered as a possibility for a sale, to carve a piece of that property out for us. So, and that's in fact what's happening. So we have our new facility, which the City Council heard about, planned for that location to the west of the proposed development area. And construction's actually begun. this last week on it. We expect it to be completed in about 18 months. It's about a 50,000 square foot building, and it will house 2 of our schools, and a recreation facility, and our cafeteria for our children. So our school children that are in the current buildings would move to that location in 2018. I'll answer any other questions that I can, but I guess.
Mr. Atkinson?
You already partly answered one question I
Sure.
had, which is, this isn't a residential expansion, this is the new educational facility, correct?
Correct.
And how will people be accessing that facility?
Good
Will they
question.
be coming in through the main Cunningham entrance?
No.
Will they be coming in off Country Club Road?
They will. If you go down Country Club Road today, you can see that the actual temporary construction entrance, which will be the permanent entrance, will be the new main entrance, not only for the school facility, but also primarily for our campus. We won't close the entrance off of Cunningham Avenue, but it'll be much more friendly for both the bus traffic, which will enter off of Country Club Road, but then also our staff traffic and our employee traffic will find it much more convenient to enter off of Country Club Road. So both entrances will be there, but it lines up, the new entrance lines up with, if you're on Country Club Road, with our Spiritual Life Center, with the spire of the Spiritual Life Center. So it's going to be very beautiful, we hope, and an asset to the community.
Any further questions? Any further questions for Mr. Holman? Mr. Storr?
Thank you. Are you satisfied or agreeing to all of the possible permitted uses under B3? Are you familiar with some of these?
We are, and the covenants that, the proposed restrictive covenants that we have proposed for the subdivision development limit that potential business, and I think it's up to 30 years. So because we're a Methodist-owned organization, we have restricted the use. It would not allow any business that would be alcohol-related, firearms, any kind of adult entertainment. So we would have, and I believe we've submitted those restricted covenants to the city as part of that, and the owner is aware of that, or I mean the potential buyer is aware of that as well. So, and they certainly would not violate any of those covenants, and that's been dictated by our board of directors as well.
Any further questions? Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody wish to address the commission in support of this proposed change? Does anybody wish to address the commission who is opposed to this proposed change? All right. Well, thank you for your testimony. I guess I'll close the public input portion of the hearing, and now we can discuss as needed. I do have one question, actually, for city staff that has to do with buffering and screening. My understanding of the zoning ordinance is that there are requirements, of course, for buffering and screening, required yards, usually 10 feet for 10 feet for yards, 5 feet for landscape buffers, and then 6-foot-high fence to provide screening and so forth for residential uses. But this is going to be an institutional, the proposed expansion is going to be an institutional use?
I think that's what we would consider it, yes.
And it's hard to tell whether the proposed area, I guess it does intersect or overlap with a multifamily structure across the street.
That's correct, yeah.
So there would be buffering and screening required on that portion of the property at least?
I don't believe so. Let me consult my So we don't require any buffering or screening in the front yard, and
Oh,
that,
that's going to be the front yard? It's
Yeah,
hard to
for-
tell, there's yards on.
well, for a lot that has frontage on, if
On
you
a
have,
street.
if you have
On
frontage
a
on a
street.
street, that's a front yard.
Okay.
That's, yeah.
Yeah. So they got 2 front yards. All right, that was where I was going with that, so,
Okay.
okay. Good, thank you. Mr. Fell?
Also, city staff question, city services run to this lot, specifically sanitary, storm sewer, water, or they have to come? So what I'm driving at, if they have to be run from across the street, wherever, the developer is going to pay to extend those services?
Well, to answer the first part of the question, I'm not sure off the top of my head where city services are. And then I might defer to Lori on whether the developer would need to pay for those.
Yes.
That's what I would have guessed.
Great. Anything further, Mr. Fell? Ms. Billman?
Yeah, I drove out there this afternoon, and additionally to the trees, the big old trees, there's also a hill, an Illinois hill, meaning it's not much of a hill. And I know they will end up cutting down most of the big old trees, and they've agreed to plant other trees. Can they get rid of that hill, too? Is that a possibility? I mean, once they own it, can they do what they want?
I would imagine that they would probably do some regrading on the site, especially if they want to be visible and accessible off of Cunningham.
I also want to mention that if we approve that, fast food restaurants can go in there as well.
Yeah, there's a range of uses, and I haven't seen the restricted covenant, but certainly there's a wide range of uses, some of which may be inappropriate for near a children's home, so. Anything further? Mr. Storr?
I assume that the new owner, this is in the city limits, correct?
It is.
And they'll have to comply with any stormwater retention, runoff, and so forth, I would assume.
You would assume correctly.
Thank you. Any further questions or points of discussion? Any motions? Ms. Billman, one more?
Are there sidewalks along Cunningham? I'm pretty sure there aren't along Country Club.
I do not actually know that. Go ahead.
There are sidewalks along Cunningham, and as part of the agreement to terminate the lease, there was an arrangement to construct, if possible, 8-foot wide multi-use path along Country Club, or if not possible, to construct a sidewalk along Country Club.
Ms. Billman, anything further?
The setback for the property, does that mean on the other side of the sidewalk? I think it's 10 feet.
It's 10 feet from the property line, which is generally about where the sidewalk is.
I was trying to figure out if any of these zoning uses require a landscape plan. From what I could just read, it didn't seem like it, that there needed to be a green buffer. All the other 3 corners have landscaping. The auto collision repair has some very nice landscaping, as well as the bank, where they have grass and shrubs and trees. Is there anything like that required?
We do have landscaping requirements.
Do you know what they are?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about losing that green space, and
And while Kevin's looking up the details, I'll just point out, I believe he said the front yard setback was 10 feet. It's actually 15 feet in this zone. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fell?
Follow up to the setback, they also have to keep the visibility triangle at the corner, I assume, correct? Which is, in this case, going to be pretty big. Right.
Trees, okay. Yeah. So this the one? And the screening one, yeah. So we have requirements for, if there are parking lots, we would require shade trees, and we require those at 1 tree for every 9 parking spaces that they would provide. And also there is, there are screening requirements that I'll get back to you in a second, once I've.
Well, there's a requirement for a landscape buffer, but I assume that could just be a strip of grass.
No, the landscape buffer generally has to be some shrubs and a tree. I think it's 3 shrubs and 1 tree for every 40 feet of frontage.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
There it is right there. You're right.
But that might only be for side and rear yards, so I think Lori's checking into that.
Yes.
Hmm.
I think. Here's one that says ground cover with living grass or other ground cover type is required at 75% of the square footage in the applicable landscaped yard, excluding the access drives. And the remaining 25% may be non-living, such as bark, wood chips, rock, stone, decorative pavement, etc.
Is that for all zones, or is that in B4E only?
Oh, yes, sir, B4E.
So the section on screening of off-street parking is page 69 for any of those following along at home. So you can meet screening requirements for parking. Well, first let me take a step back. So if parking is adjoining a residential zoning district or residential use, so in this case it is adjoining a residential district, the Cunningham Children's Home property. So if, in that case, then, screening for parking can be met through either landscaping or a solid fence or wall 4 to 6 feet in height. So then it gets into specifics that the landscape needs to be tall enough to screen it.
Great. Anything further, Ms. Bilbin? No? Any other points of discussion? Mr. Ackerson?
No, I think you just, I waited long enough to answer my questions. So the Cunningham property, it's institutional, but it is considered residential for the purposes of applying these requirements.
It's zoned residential. It's a mix of R4 and R5.
So in instances where the zoning ordinance says if you are abutting a residential zone, we would need to apply that. In instances where it says you're applying, or excuse me, abutting a residential use, we would not need to apply it. So it really does depend on the exact regulation.
And so my other part of that is, since their planned expansion is the school and other, but it's in an area zoned residential currently, that would still be considered residential for the purposes we're talking about?
Since it's zoned residential, then any regulation that says residential zone, you know, you must do this, then that would apply.
Anything further? No further discussion? Any motions? Mr. Atkinson?
Are we finished with discussion? Or
I asked if there was any discussion, and nobody
I'm
said
not hearing
anything, so
any.
that-
So
The
if,
sound of silence to me says that we might be finished, but if you've got something else?
no, I don't.
Bring it on in.
All I have is a motion.
Oh, well,
Yeah. I motion
We'll
that,
consider it.
that we, to approve the request.
okay.
I don't have the correct wording, but
Mr. Atkinson has a motion to send Plan Case 2312 M17 to the City Council with a recommendation for approval.
right.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Storr. Is there any further discussion? If not, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Spillman,
No.
Mr. Fell,
Yes.
Mr. Fitch,
Yes.
Ms. Drago,
Yes.
Mr. Storr,
Yes.
Mr. Trail, Mr. Ackerson.
Yes.
That motion is approved. And do we have an idea when, does this have to go back to the council, I guess, for final approval?
Yes, this would go on October 2nd.
Great, thank you. Plan case, so, thank you, that case is closed. I'll now open Plan Case 2313 SU 17, a request by Roanoke Concrete Products Company for a special use permit to establish a ready-mix plant and material recycling center at 3202 North Lincoln in the IN2 Heavy Industrial District. This case is now open, but will be continued to the October 5th, 2017 Plan Commission meeting. And we'll receive a staff memo prior to that time. So we're continuing that. We don't have any new business. Any audience participation? Nope. Do we have a staff report?
We do. A couple of brief things. There are still 2 weeks to comment on the Curtis Road Corridor Study. Comment period for that ends on October 5th. And the City Council voted to defeat the resolution of protest in the Champaign County Zoning Board case that you all heard at your last meeting. And the County Board, well, they may have already heard the case tonight, but it's going on tonight.
Which one was that?
That was for the Woodland Acres Mobile Home Park rezoning.
We defeated the resolution of protest.
Yeah, they went along with your recommendation, is what I'm trying to say.
We like that. Anything else? We don't have a study session, therefore we are adjourned. Thank you.